Let's get some analysis now with Greg Sheridan. He's foreign editor at The Australian. Greg, great to see you. A momentous series of events in the Middle East over the last couple of days. I want to ask you, where does it go from here?
Well, Kieran, great to see you and great to be back after a short absence. Look, it's intensely unpredictable from here. Iran is massively weakened by Trump's action. I think Trump is going to redefine, incidentally, grey zone conflict. The Iranians, even before the Chinese and Russians, were masters of attacking the US without doing it formally with their own military, and thinking that that meant the US wouldn't attack them. Well, that's over. Iran has attacked pretty well all the Gulf states and all of its neighbours. I think that's a dumb thing for them to do, although you can see that they're trying to, present their own deterrence by saying that if they survive this, it shows if you attack them, there are region-wide consequences. But they have solidified the very strong anti-Iranian sentiment all through the Gulf and through the region. Those countries will now look even more closely to the US. The US can destroy Iran's missiles and nuclear capabilities and governing capabilities. It's not clear whether they can destroy the regime. And I think the confusing statements we've heard of the administration the last day or so about the objectives now are just to destroy missiles, not to change the regime. I think that's inherently dishonest. They want to change the regime, but I think they'll have to keep going for some time to have any chance of that.
Yeah, and in terms, I was reading your piece today in The Australian, you say that in terms of the history of this, they've got Trump has got the right friends and the right enemies at the moment. He's doing, this is a noble thing that they're doing. How does it fit within international law in your view, and what are the economic implications out of all of this?
Well, yes, I think Trump has got the right friends and the right enemies. The Albanese government deserves praise for backing the Americans. The international law situation is much murkier than people would have us believe. First of all, the United States and Israel have a perfect right under self-defence to retaliate against Iran. This is what I was saying about the grey zone thing. You can't have a situation in which a nation can continually attack you, but because it hasn't sort of formally declared war and moved the tanks across the borders, you can't retaliate. The second observation is that international law is in any event a load of baloney. No one pays a blind bit of attention to it. Iran never paid a blind bit of attention to it. The only mechanism for enforcing it is the United Nations Security Council, and the United States has a veto on the United Nations Security Council. So there are no international law fallouts. That's just kind of nonsense, really. So what do you say? International law prevents the United States from imposing a cost on its enemies, but it doesn't prevent Russia from invading Ukraine. Well, you're just mad to put your faith in that. The economic consequences could be quite severe. Iran has just moved to close the Strait of Hormuz. We know that 20% of the world's oil flows through there. It's likely, while it can still fire missiles, and remember, Hamas was able to still fire missiles after 2 years of war with Israel right on its doorstep. While Iran can still fire missiles, it may well target more explicitly oil facilities in the Gulf, just to say, well, if you're going to attack us, there's going to be chaos. Now, I think that would lead to an escalation by the United States and by the Gulf states. But you could easily see a very big rise in oil prices, and that would be obviously bad for Australia. It'd probably be temporary, but it's pretty combustible for the next few weeks.
You mentioned the Russia in your response there. I'm just wondering, are there any implications for Russia and China in this, given the traditional links, well, certainly the recent, if not alliances, relationship, at the very least, between Tehran, China and Russia?
Yeah, Russia and China have very big implications arising out of this. But it has to be said, both positive and negative. So the negative implication is that they have reason to be scared of Donald Trump. The world is secure when the bad guys are scared of the American president. Remember, Iran took American hostages under Jimmy Carter, released them in a nanosecond after Ronald Reagan was elected because they were scared of Ronald Reagan. So Russia and China take one lesson. Trump will take decisive military action if you push him the wrong way. Secondly, they probably lose a functional ally. Iran has been supplying drones to Russia and supplying oil to China. And so if Iran is taken out of the equation, they lose part of the authoritarian axis, Russia, China, North Korea and Iran. However, sad to say, there are some positive outcomes for Russia and China out of this too. If the price of oil goes up, that helps Russia because it still is a big energy exporter. And then there's this other very unpleasant, unavoidable truth. The West, despite years of war in Ukraine and the drumbeat of massive Chinese military modernisation, has not increased its industrial capacity to the point that it needs to be able to resupply these weapons. The United States has probably used more than a third of its Patriot interceptors. And, that means it's going to be harder for Europeans to buy those weapons for Ukraine. And God forbid, if anything should go haywire with China, the US has a depleted arsenal. Now, both Europe and the United States and, of course, Australia are at fault for not reforming their industrial base to have a much bigger production of munitions.
Finally, Greg, what are the implications for Trump domestically? You and I have spoken over the last couple of years, certainly the campaign leading into it and subsequently. Trump's America First doctrine, many within the MAGA movement have thought that this would be the end of foreign military interventions, but not so.
Yeah, Trump is inherently very unpredictable, even to his base. This term is very much different from the first Trump term. He's not sacking aides. He's developed a taste for specific military action. It's clear that J.D. Vance and some of the MAGA base are unhappy about it, especially the odious nutcase Tucker Carlson, who thinks the world is a giant Jewish-Israeli conspiracy. But the base so far has gone with Trump. So long as Trump is successful and so long as he's not committing ground troops. But even if he is successful, I don't think that will gain him a huge amount of votes in the heartland. The MAGA base is less isolationist than it's made out to be. What it didn't like were long, costly, inconclusive wars that America finally lost. It doesn't mind, as J.D. Vance said, the US punching its enemies on the nose every so often. But everything about this Iran, the political consequences of this Iran venture will depend on how it goes. If in the end you get a more civilised Iranian government out of it, Trump will justifiably claim a massive victory. I don't think that gives him a huge amount of votes, but it certainly means he won't lose any votes. If, on the other hand, it is absolute chaos, the price of oil goes through the roof, American consumers are hit, and there are more American casualties, well, potentially it could become quite unpopular for Trump. So far, I would say his base is with him, but it's all to play for in the coming weeks.
We just had the live pictures. I said finally, but I want to pick up on these live pictures out of Beirut because to get your thoughts on this too, Greg, the Hezbollah, diminished as they are, they're still trying to sort of cause some headaches for Israel. Interesting, though, in the last year, because the Lebanese Prime Minister now and President, emboldened by a diminished Hezbollah, are saying they should de-weaponise and stand down. In the meantime, Israel will smash them even harder. But it's an interesting sort of situation right now because there's been a bit more equilibrium in that country to Israel's north with a diminished Hezbollah, one of the Iranian proxies.
Well, Kieran, as you know, Lebanon is a magnificent and tragic country, the cradle of so much civilization, such a fabulous culture, but it is blighted by this Hezbollah, which is the agent of Iran. And now Hezbollah is firing missiles at Israel for absolutely no reason at all to do with Lebanon, but to avenge the death of the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. As a result, Israel is going to pulverise Hezbollah, not only in southern Lebanon, but in parts of Beirut. That inevitably imposes, regrettable, totally unwanted civilian casualties, and it also imposes a severe economic and infrastructure dislocation cost on the Lebanese nation. Now, the Lebanese nation has not been able to subdue Hezbollah, even after Israel weakened it in round one. Hezbollah has come back for round two, and Israel, I would guess, will be ferocious in this campaign against Hezbollah. And I would say every Lebanese person except Hezbollah terrorists would want Hezbollah to stand down and disarm. But they are showing themselves, as Hamas was, to be complete agents of the Iranian government. And that, of course, is part of the broader operation against Iran. Iran was running violent military campaigns from Hezbollah, from Hamas, from the Houthis, from militias in Iraq. This whole network of violence is really centred on Iran.
Yep, it is, and it's certainly a diminished access right now. Greg, thank you. As always, really good to chat. We'll see you next week.